територіях. Ці та інші питання обговорять експерти з України та за кордону.
У рамках міжнародного форуму відбудуться круглі столи, панельні дискусії, семінари, виставки, майстер-класи. Запрошуємо молодь, активних громадян, студентів, освітян, журналістів, представників релігійних та громадських організацій до участі.
Реєстрація та деталі на сайті is.uku.edu.ua. Форум відбудеться у гібридному форматі – наживо та онлайн. З 7 по 10 жовтня у Львові відбудеться 17-й екуменічний соціальний тиждень «Стійкість спільнот. Шлях до зцілення та відновлення країни».
Форум відбувається з ініціативи Інституту екуменічних студій Українського католицького університету у співпраці із фондом Конрада Аденауера в Україні та Євангелічною церквою Німеччини.
Свідчення стійкості в часі війни, реінтеграція громад та ветеранів, українські спільноти за кордоном, переслідування релігійних спільнот на тимчасово окупованих територіях. Ці та інші питання обговорять експерти з України та за кордону.
У рамках міжнародного форуму відбудуться круглі столи, панельні дискусії, семінари, виставки, майстер-класи. Запрошуємо молодь, активних громадян, студентів, освітян, журналістів, представників релігійних та громадських організацій до участі.
Реєстрація та деталі на сайті is.uku.edu.ua. Форум відбудеться у гібридному форматі – наживо та онлайн. З 7 по 10 жовтня у Львові відбудеться 17-й екуменічний соціальний тиждень «Стійкість спільнот. Шлях до зцілення та відновлення країни».
Форум відбувається з ініціативи Інституту екуменічних студій Українського католицького університету у співпраці із фондом Конрада Аденауера в Україні та Євангелічною церквою Німеччини.
Свідчення стійкості в часі війни, реінтеграція громад та ветеранів, українські спільноти за кордоном, переслідування релігійних спільнот на тимчасово окупованих територіях. Ці та інші питання обговорять експерти з України та за кордону.
У рамках міжнародного форуму відбудуться круглі столи, панельні дискусії, семінари, виставки, майстер-класи. Запрошуємо молодь, активних громадян, студентів, освітян, журналістів, представників релігійних та громадських організацій до участі.
Реєстрація та деталі на сайті is.uku.edu.ua. Форум відбудеться у гібридному форматі – наживо та онлайн. З 7 по 10 жовтня у Львові відбудеться 17-й екуменічний соціальний тиждень «Стійкість спільнот. Шлях до зцілення та відновлення країни».
Форум відбувається з ініціативи Інституту екуменічних студій Українського католицького університету у співпраці із фондом Конрада Аденауера в Україні та Євангелічною церквою Німеччини.
Свідчення стійкості в часі війни, реінтеграція громад та ветеранів, українські спільноти за кордоном, переслідування релігійних спільнот на тимчасово окупованих територіях. Ці та інші питання обговорять експерти з України та за кордону.
У рамках міжнародного форуму відбудуться круглі столи, панельні дискусії, семінари, виставки, майстер-класи. Запрошуємо молодь, активних громадян, студентів, освітян, журналістів, представників релігійних та громадських організацій до участі.
Реєстрація та деталі на сайті is.uku.edu.ua. Форум відбудеться у гібридному форматі – наживо та онлайн. З 7 по 10 жовтня у Львові відбудеться 17-й екуменічний соціальний тиждень «Стійкість спільнот. Шлях до зцілення та відновлення країни».
Форум відбувається з ініціативи Інституту екуменічних студій Українського католицького університету у співпраці із фондом Конрада Аденауера в Україні та Євангелічною церквою Німеччини.
Свідчення стійкості в часі війни, реінтеграція громад та ветеранів, українські спільноти за кордоном, переслідування релігійних спільнот на тимчасово окупованих територіях. Ці та інші питання обговорять експерти з України та за кордону.
У рамках міжнародного форуму відбудуться круглі столи, панельні дискусії, семінари, виставки, майстер-класи. Запрошуємо молодь, активних громадян, студентів, освітян, журналістів, представників релігійних та громадських організацій до участі.
Реєстрація та деталі на сайті is.uku.edu.ua. Форум відбудеться у гібридному форматі – наживо та онлайн. З З 7 по 10 жовтня у Львові відбудеться 17-й екуменічний соціальний тиждень «Стійкість спільнот. Шлях до зцілення та відновлення країни».
Форум відбувається з ініціативи Інституту екуменічних студій Українського католицького університету у співпраці із фондом Конрада Аденауера в Україні та Євангелічною церквою Німеччини.
Свідчення стійкості в часі війни, реінтеграція громад та ветеранів, українські спільноти за кордоном, переслідування релігійних спільнот на тимчасово окупованих територіях. Ці та інші питання обговорять експерти з України та за кордону.
У рамках міжнародного форуму відбудуться круглі столи, панельні дискусії, семінари, виставки, майстер-класи. Запрошуємо молодь, активних громадян, студентів, освітян, журналістів, представників релігійних та громадських організацій до участі.
Реєстрація та деталі на сайті is.uku.edu.ua. Форум відбудеться у гібридному форматі – наживо та онлайн. З 7 по 10 жовтня у Львові відбудеться 17-й екуменічний соціальний тиждень «Стійкість спільнот. Шлях до зцілення та відновлення країни».
Форум відбувається з ініціативи Інституту екуменічних студій Українського католицького університету у співпраці із фондом Конрада Аденауера в Україні та Євангелічною церквою Німеччини.
Свідчення стійкості в часі війни, реінтеграція громад та ветеранів, українські спільноти за кордоном, переслідування релігійних спільнот на тимчасово окупованих територіях. Ці та інші питання обговорять експерти з України та за кордону.
У рамках міжнародного форуму відбудуться круглі столи, панельні дискусії, семінари, виставки, майстер-класи. Запрошуємо молодь, активних громадян, студентів, освітян, журналістів, представників релігійних та громадських організацій до участі.
Реєстрація та деталі на сайті is.uku.edu.ua. Форум відбудеться у гібридному форматі – наживо та онлайн. З 7 по
Dear colleagues and participants, offline and online, we are starting in 2 minutes. Yeah, so could you please pass this? Or I think we can start. Yes. So our participants are joining us. It is the second panel of the third day of the Ecumenical Social Week. I would like to express again and again gratitude to the ACADA and to the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, who made it possible for us to have an in-person discussion. I am Tetiana Kalenychenko. I am absolutely delighted to be a moderator of the second discussion dedicated to the topic of Hromadas as communities. We will speak about Hromadas as territorial units, as religious communities. That is why think ahead of your questions. Maybe there is some comments or reflection that you would like to share, as it is of the utmost importance to all of us. We will focus today during this discussion at Hromadas becoming communities, and generally what is a community, because we speak about commonalities, about something common in terms of our values. How do we become closer to each other, not to become strangers? We have Olena Tsytsulnikova, who is joining us online from Kharkiv. We will have 7-10 minutes for each speaker to share key ideas, key reflections, to share your experience, and we plan to have more time left for discussion, for our Q&A session, because we have the luxury of offline participants here. I would like to pass it over to Taras Dyatlyk, who is a theologian and mentor of theological education in Ukraine. Over to you, Taras. I would like to greet everyone here. Thank you for your hospitality. Thank you for this platform presented to us, for us to be able to have this conversation about community resilience, about Hromadas, about society. I would like to start with some biblical theological ideas in the context of the role of church in times of the full-scale invasion And I think that all of you present here know about this information. This is what you can hear when you are at church. So I would like to start with 4 first statements of Christ. Especially when we are suffering and we understand that sometimes it is conscious and unconscious. And these 7 sayings that we all know about. We know about salvation of humankind. This is what happened. And this is exactly where we had freedom, where we had reconciliation of God and humans through trust, through confidence. And we know how it opened the possibility to that. That is why this is something what sets us apart from other social-oriented organizations. Why we are church? Because it is about crucified Jesus, according to Apostle Peter. So the first saying of Jesus on the cross, when we have this urge for resistance, and there will be an article published maybe in my blog or on other platforms for those interested. It is, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. I think that was the reaction of us at the Ukrainian church, of many our communities, local communities, in the first days of war. What are you actually doing? Russians, Russian Christians, those who didn't want to condemn or they passively supported a special military operation. I think that that was the prayer of many of us, the saying of Jesus on the cross, and for us as representatives of church, that you know not what you are doing. When that was the first saying of Jesus, when Jesus was encouraging Father to forgive them because they know not what they do. It was not about this absolute forgiveness and acceptance or absolute hospitality of God, which is accepting for criminals, perpetrators, aggressors without any justice. I think that this saying should be deemed from the perspective that Jesus uttered these words not from the Jerusalem hill, not from the church, from the Galilean sea, sitting there and fishing together with disciples. It is Jesus saying something on the cross. It is about the moral right to call for reconciliation. What is the source of this voice? Is it coming from a pub or from the height of the cross where Jesus was crucified? It is about openness to those who are different from us, to those who are our enemies. And it is about the church. It is about our readiness to speak about reconciliation, accepting responsibility and being accountable. Also, it is about the transformation of the heart of our enemies. And we know it from the story of Jesus Christ. Then there is another one. Today shalt thou be with me in paradise. That was a saying to one of the offender, the criminals. That was the person addressed, later recognized the very importance, and if to draw some parallels between suffering of the Ukrainian church and Ukrainian people, given the full-scale invasion and war, it is not only about our individual resilience, it is about giving hope to those who are next to us. We also mentioned about it yesterday when Simon was helping Christ to carry the cross, and the cross was going on Via Dolorosa. He was suffering, but He paid attention to women who were crying and they were also suffering. I think it speaks of the resilience of church, that even in times when churches are suffering, they're suffering everywhere, in the rear, on the front line. It is about our aptitude to be compassionate, to empathize. And it is about these two different people who had a different attitude, and some people, they really can come to a realization of what they do. Jesus being on the cross was still shaping a community of hope. The third saying of Jesus on the cross is directed towards our families. Jesus says to Mary, "Woman, behold thy son, behold thy mother." This is another lesson that we have from Christ about church resilience. When we have millions of families split by war, we know about all the losses, people missing, refugees, IDPs, prisoners of war, women, men, brothers, sisters, children. On the cross, Jesus tries to form new family relationships grounded on trust, care, love. Suffering himself, he tells Mary, mother of Jesus, "Today, a woman, behold thy son, and behold thy mother." It is a community open to the robber and open to the centurion. And Jesus accepts him as the fifth brother, because from Joseph there were also some siblings. And the last saying, where I also see resilience: my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" I think that our capability of being resistant in church is something that we can see not only like we can teach the people, churchize them, and it is also about us formulating in our prayers all the experience our people are undergoing, those people who are looking for hope, those who are despaired, those who are physically, spiritually, emotionally exhausted. We are tempted to consider resilience only as strength. We do not perceive vulnerability as part of resilience, our openness to vulnerability. Being a community means being open to vulnerability. In the context of the previous session we just had, it is about accepting somebody who's different from you, somebody who has a different nature, so to say. And here Jesus can really put it into words, something that he was experiencing, but not only he. Another one, in terms of understanding of the biblical theological concept of resilience of community and this hope, was that Jesus, well, at least this is my impression, didn't feel shame that he was publicly in the eyes of his enemies, some of his disciples, they were standing close to him, or Father. He was not afraid as the Son to utter these words to God, to put into words what he was feeling, this vulnerability and this abandonment. Sometimes we are ashamed of our public prayers when we express our feelings. However, this is exactly what opens ways to 3 more sayings of Jesus on the cross. You can read it in the Gospel. This is some place a source of strength for the Ukrainian church. When we discuss the theme of resilience of communities, and yes, if to speak about the centurion and this robber, for those who are on the cross, for those who are aggressive, for us being able to accept those who are different from us in our families. I think that, yes, we can speak about the Christian Hromada turning into a community, because I don't think that all Hromadas share this experience. I think that another participant of this panel, Dmytro Fedorchak, has some practical examples of a Christian Hromada being a community. He's the head of the Leadership and Service Program at the Ukrainian educational platform Charitable Foundation. I would like to express gratitude for the topic of the panel discussion. As we can see the distinction between Hromada and between community here, it's really important for those who work in community making. Very often these terms are used as synonyms. However, Hromada is more about a territorial aspect, and community means something slightly different. I would like to build on what Taras Dyatlyk has stated, because he started with the words of Jesus, and I would like to develop it with the ideas of the act of God when Jesus was washing the feet of disciples. There were 3 acts that he did. So he washed the feet. When we speak about integration and cooperation of the Christian Hromada becoming a community, it could be an urban area, a village, a rural area. I think it is a very good model for religious Hromadas to understand what they have to do. Because the first thing that we do is washing the feet. Christ saw this practical physical need of a disciple according to the traditions of hospitality, which was relevant for that time. With regard to religious Hromada, this is what they have to do, because we know that we can see how that was done in 2022 when religious Hromadas were ready to open this possibility for others. I remember that that happened on the balcony of one of the Protestant church. It is the Noah's Ark story for me. There was a parrot and there was a cat following. So there was a dog and a cat, and there was an owner of these pets. And I think that traditionally it's not easy to imagine it in a church. It is similar to Christ washing feet. That was something unusual, but it was dearly needed and symbolic. Religious churches, they became the Noah's Ark when they could accept everybody, animals, people, some material things which were important for them, just to give them space for them to be able to stay there. If to speak about the Protestant tradition, we know how difficult it was in some churches to have spaces for smoking, because, well, that's those people who smoked a lot, and we had to explain that that is a need that people have. There were steps taken for religious Hromadas to change. It was important from the perspective of integration, and that was a turning point. It's important to understand that there is something bigger. It's not just my community, my parish. I do not mean in a universal sense. It is also about other people and the needs of other people. This is a process similar to Christ washing feet of the disciple in the sea. Then he sat together with all of them. That was the next thing that he did. It is also essential If to speak about the Ukrainian educational platform, the organization that I represent, we are based in Lviv. This is our head office, but we also have some other offices across the country. We see how important it is to sit at a round table with other partners when you go to the city of Mykolaiv and you stay overnight, or you stay with the citizens of Kharkiv. Though we know that very often there are strikes there. It's not that you come from a comfortable place, you stay there for the day of training, and then you run away because of the danger. It is sharing these moments together. It is about togetherness. It is also about us not applying this approach when there is somebody beneath us and we are above, because we are providers and they are the beneficiaries. It is another important thing that we do. This is a process that we have as a communities. This is adequate Christianity, ready to serve, ready for being together. Only then the conversation started. It didn't start with sermon, with the urge to repent. It's not about people listening to the sermon and then receiving something, some humanitarian aid. There were some cases like that, not really good cases, but I hope that was already in the past. And the third one is a separate thing. It cannot be the same as the first, as washing the feet, because Christ didn't start with the sermon when people actually had a need. By this example, we need to understand that understanding comes first. Do not come and do not tell people how to live their lives. What you need to do is to listen to these people, to communicate with them. We have facilitators of local communities. There is Isila methodology when you learn the needs of the region, the needs of communities, to get a better understanding of their need, not to brag about how much you know or to be very proud of your expertise. It is about communication. We can see it in several sectors. There are different approaches, different methods. I think that churches can follow suit here, because it's important to sit together, to start this communication. However, this is such a challenge for many of us. But it's not really easy for us to do, because you need basically to bite your tongue. You are so inclined to starting with ceremonies, or some people, they'd rather share their pain and their experience. So you really need to bite your tongue and to listen to other communities, to what they have to offer. We at the Ukrainian Education Platform try to follow in this way through our facilitators, community facilitators. They give us some feedback, we use this information, and we can take informed decisions then. We also have one of the institutes in New York, which defines 3 characteristics of communities. This is identity, structure.
And I think this is what we should pay attention to when we speak about communities. When we speak about when we speak about Hromadas and communities, we need to understand what identity is, and it sometimes is easy to understand when we just Google the statistics of our region, because sometimes it seems very interesting to look at various regions and to compare the levels of patriotism on how people are the patriots of Ukraine, and to what extent they are patriots of Ukraine. And it seems to you that those are comparable things, like the patriotism of a Ukrainian and the patriotism of a resident of Odessa. There's different attitude to their cities and towns. When we go to communities, it's a very simple practice. You don't need much time or money for that. You can approach a person and ask, what's interesting in your community? Where should we go? What should we see? And you can hear about the attitude of people to their communities. During our last visit to Vinnytsia, people said about the Praho Museum, and we're, ashamed of saying anything, and said we have nothing else there. But that's not possible. Vinnytsia should have more. So people either are ashamed of that or they don't know. So this is this moment which help you understand the identity of the city or town, well, depending on the scale. So there's a moment where you need to sit down to listen, to understand what is the identity of this community, so that you understand how I can enrich it, not just get something from it, but also enrich it. And this is what I often mention when I speak to the residents of Kalenychenko. I tell them that we need to understand whether the idea of our country is the expansion of Kalenychenko or an attempt to understand other regions, because it looks like the same, one big Ukraine, but in fact these are different things. And the same goes about church communities. If we want to become a part of the community, to serve, to help, to enrich is one thing. But if we want to build a big parish for 1,000 people instead of 100, and then think how to pay for utility services, that's a different thing. Then there's experience. We need to understand what common experience we have. And here I would like to stress that probably this is about having not only negative experience, the negative experience of war, of course, but we need to see the positive side of that. So for some people from Vinnytsia who didn't know what positive things are there in Vinnytsia, so it's like what Father Hrom mentioned yesterday about Chanets, so when they have nativity plays and other events, to have this joint common experience so that they can say that they did it as a community. So that was the church, the local community, well, people prepared food, joined and have had this common experience. So we cannot speak about some loud festivals right now, but these can be good social events. If there is a possibility to have an exhibition, for example, or some small thematic meetings about national heroes or great persons, these may be the representatives of clergy as well, artists, poets, and also regular secular people who are interested in church, knowing about them as well. And the next one is the structure. So we have to understand our place in all this, where our niche is, and how we are going to work. Because we can say that we are the most important, we are the right ones, but people don't think so, because people don't know enough about us. As I've mentioned, we're starting not from zero, but from a minus, because people have certain stereotypes about our organizations, and they can tell us a lot of negative things, but little positive things. So we need to understand the structure of our activity, what our structure is, how we work, because again, speaking of our organization, there are some very simple things which some pastors don't know about, and it means that we can do much more if we do less, but if we develop our teams. For them, it seems like a complete capitulation when you tell them, let us slow down a bit. So in a church team, you always need a person who would be slowing you down and who will tell you, let us think whether we can do it. Maybe we should extend our team. And we had these cases when, for example, in Odessa, we worked with the church when the priest didn't have the church. That was the priest of the Roman Catholic Church, and we engaged secular team, and that had a very good impact, because it was a good social project connected with veterans. It was good experience of collaboration when people who had never contacted church had a chance to understand what church is, that you are not dragged there by force, and you can do some interesting things together. And what is good is that this collaboration is continuing. Despite the fact that these people remain, well, secular people, they didn't become like priests, they didn't go to study in a seminary, but we see the example of how a community and people will and church join for some greater good. And this example of Christ, first to serve, and then to have this peer-to-peer attitude, or what we call as participative approach, that those are the three steps which Christ showed us and confirmed about community. And it seems to me that this is the key path for church community to integrate and to enrich the secular communities. Thank you. Engagement of secular people is possible, as you said. It's not that afraid, and not everyone becomes a member of clergy after that. And I think we have a very different regional representation here, so we can share here various experience. We have also international experience. We have experience of various communities. Sometimes people come voluntarily, but sometimes they find themselves in certain circumstances. And I would like to ask Anna Dovbyk, who is a specialist in peace building, one of the first people in Ukraine with the specialized education in Ukraine and a manager of peace building projects. It's a great honor for me to participate in this discussion about resilience, about the education I received, and the search for the ways towards resilience was this request I had when I went to study at this program, and this is for Ukrainians, how to build their resilience and how to serve the communities I will be working with later on. And I think that the main thing here is the program at the Eastern Mennonite University. These are Mennonites, they are Protestants. This is a university in the United States of America. And the program is not just for Christians. It's for representatives of all religious and non-religious organizations. We had about 30 participants from around the world, and these were people from Japan, people from various African countries. These were also people from Europe. I was the only one from Ukraine. And this is about what Dmytro mentioned, that a Hromada, a community that unites its forces and efforts for a bigger cause. And in the beginning, they may not have this strong uniting feelings of unitedness, because what can unite Christians may not unite non-Christians. And I was reflecting on whether I actually got this experience of resilience, and I realized that this program itself, which is called Transformation of Conflicts, has the development of resilience of a personality and communities, and one of their main tasks, communities as groups of people, like student groups, homogeneous groups, as people who will be working in their countries later on. And these are people who come from countries where they have violent conflicts. And I distinguished the main areas here, but I united it all in an approach which is called recovery of universities, resilient universities. This is the a part of renewable education under the umbrella of renewable justice we mentioned today. And to explain it quickly, this is restorative justice, unlike punitive justice. While punitive justice is looking for who is guilty, restorative justice is trying to figure out what happened, what was the damage, and the second question is what kind of impact it had. So, because it had impact not only on the person who was the victim, but also on the perpetrator. And the third question is, how do we fix this damage? And restorative university, this notion, has of restorative justice is important. But there are two other important moments here, and this is the restorative approach to education. And here I would like to draw some examples of what it means. For example, every lesson, every class started by students sharing what they feel, and that could have been about anything, about what I think about a book I read, or what I think about what my emotional state is right now. Why is it important? Because this is what shaped the community of students as a community, not just a group of people who study, because we built relationships, we built trust. another important moment when it comes to trust is that that was the middle of the course, and there was this moment of summary. We discussed how the first part passed, and the students shared anonymously about the course and what was better, what was lacking, and it was a sign of trust for me to the students. And then it was even better when the teacher came back to the next class and we discussed it all. And there were some moments which we wanted to change as students, but the teacher explained why it cannot be done so. And this free communication also developed this trust and understanding of what community is. And I will finish by the following. Well, resilience is shaped by several things, and Taras mentioned about acceptance of vulnerability through the prism of understanding of what trauma is, and what trauma is. It's not about curing from trauma. It's about understanding trauma and how it works, and this is a topic for many courses, although there are some courses which were called Education about Resilience, and I was thinking, what does it mean to know about trauma and to be aware of trauma? It's when we realize, when we understand that there is a multitude of sources and reasons of how trauma is manifested in human learning. Well, in Ukrainian society, the biggest trauma is the trauma of war, but we can also add here other sources. These are historical reasons, as there may be this traumatic reaction, and intergenerational reasons, and knowledge about it helps. The second accent, which I showed there, that there is a reaction, a response of a person to trauma. This is in emotions, this is in their behavior, and we don't stigmatize it. When we understand how these processes take place, we have compassion and we have understanding of what to do with that. There are many practices, and one of those I internalized was to breathe, and I think I wanted to tell you about this academic education, which stresses very practical aspects of work. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's very interesting how university is being shaped as a community, as a dialogue of the teacher and the students with each other. And this is what we see when we work with priests. We are told that we have to make the community more active, we need more people, we need to engage the youth, and so on. And this is what previous speakers also mentioned. Well, have you talked to them and have you asked them what they want, whether they want to be more active? And when we speak about community, we very frequently think about territorial community. So I would like to invite our online speaker, Olena Tsytsulnikova, who is the specialist in the development of communities, and she is also an MHPSS specialist. She has great experience in support of communities. Thank you. While the others were speaking, I was rewriting things several times because it's very inspiring to be here among such interesting people and listening to those speeches. And I was thinking about my first steps of trust. My grandmother was Ukrainian and my grandfather was a Poland. I have very good memories from my childhood, and I was recalling all those values my grandfather and grandmother instilled in me. And speaking about my work with the communities, I've been working with Hromadas and communities around Ukraine for 2.5 years. These are remote communities, deoccupied communities, small communities. These are communities who host many IDPs. These are communities in Dnipro Oblast who host people in times of evacuation, and I see and observe many things. So I will probably share more of my subjective ideas, my observations, I would say. I see now two main topics. This is grief and beliefs. How a community is grieving, how they survive the losses, how they live with them, and what a community believes in, who a community believes in. And I see that people who remain in communities, especially when these are members of the parliament, executive members of the local councils, executive committees, they find it very difficult to cope with their losses in terms of their social roles and their identity. Well, I don't think there have been any situations when I was not approached and I was told, we have a woman and she has an indefinite loss. How do we talk to her? She's a person who's taking some decisions. So what do we do here? And these are more. We will have more and more cases like that in our communities, and this will unite past, present, and future. Past, because a part of what was happening at these territories is something we cannot just forget about, and this is about reconsideration and the future, because there has to be a strategy, there has to be a vision, and from what I see, not everyone is ready for this new vision and this new strategy. What I can see from the example of grieving, we have communities who write projects and they think about some memorialization, because it has also to do with what is presented in memory. But there has to be some tables, for example, that a person lived here because they can't do otherwise. Speaking of community, it's very important to understand what social capital remained on this territory. So if this is Kherson Oblast, these are small communities which were deoccupied, and very few young people come there, and their main social capital are elderly people, but they're still social capital. And in our experience, we do not have this experience of developing communities and involving elderly people into this development, because there are many platforms for young people, but elderly as a social capital are a big strength and a big force. For example, in Kryvyi Rih there is Shelter Plus, a great center of cultural gathering of different people, and elderly people there do a lot. This is the Third Age Institute where they are taught very interesting things, but they have also help. They can see the foundation these people can rely on. And also I would like to say that the faith I see many examples. A year ago, I had those projects where we had trainings in communities. Those were mechanisms of quality interaction, and it was unique for me that almost each community had people with from a religious center we have here, and that was Chernivtsi Oblast. We had 3 persons from different religious centers, and they worked together, they shared this experience, and this actually united these people.
What else I would like to add is that another challenge about identity, about some positions, because I think that these days people have don't have this clear identity. Am I a mother or a woman or a wife? 56% of people, these are those people who have some close ones fighting. The social role, that's not easy to build our social roles now. In Hromadas, every day we have challenges, and in such social roles, people like teachers, social workers, they're very burned out. With some positions, we know that some of them are closer to the front line. Under legislation, they do not have enough resources, and that is why it is the challenge they are faced up with. I don't know how relevant it is what I'm sharing with you. However, I would like to share my experience. What is of interest to me, the topic for my exploration is the topic of grieving and memorialization. Grieving as the basis. If to take into consideration psychology, we have 4 key feelings: joy, anger, sadness, and fear. That is why with this sadness, it is important for us to make a pause, to become aware of what happened, and then to keep living. This is about the strategy. The strategies will be adopted at a community level. I already see very interesting examples, cases of integration. I'm feeling happy when the integration is aimed not only at locals and IDPs, but I already see Hromadas which see it in a wider perspective, integration within different communities, IDPs, veterans, and those people who are still in action. They have a wider infrastructure. They also have some training for human resources. These are unique cases. We have Fastiv Hromada in the Kyiv region. They are already preparing to receive many members of their communities. It is about social workers training, developing an absolutely different structure for the integration, and the way people are united in these Hromadas is viewed broader. That's everything on my end. Maybe there are some questions addressed to me. Thank you, Olena. I would like to encourage to think about your questions if you're interested in some practical examples or some cases about these are the people who know a lot about Hromadas. They go to communities. Common vision for Hromadas and communities is something that we see challenging during our meetings with communities. The first thing that you encounter is the question, what about our future? How do we know what the future holds for us? We don't know about tomorrow, but these questions are to be asked. We will try to find answer to these questions. I would like to invite Olena Kopina, who is a Dyatlyk facilitator, a sociologist, and a psychologist. She also worked in our Dyatlyk in Action initiative. She has extensive experience of working with communities. So what about those other people who can help communities, who can accompany them? It's an honor for me to be present here and to have such a great audience. It is extremely difficult for me. I would like to express gratitude to the colleagues for everything that you have mentioned. I find it really relatable. It resonates with many things I wanted to share with you, so I'm trying to get a clearer picture. I started working with communities in 2014. That was Kharkiv. It is my native city where I organized a dialogue between 2 conflict groups. It was the conflict based on diverse values. These were the representatives of Maidan and the anti-Maidan. And then I did so many things, just you name it. These were different dialogue practices in Hromadas across Ukraine. I provided training about dialogues, about a facilitated process where people can feel freely with their vision, with their needs and their interests being heard. They can come up with common decisions which would meet the needs of all those people who are interested in such joint decisions. I also worked in the process of decentralization with those Hromadas which were shaping these amalgamated territorial communities. Also, I dealt with security issues. With the full-scale invasion, my key role was to ensure I work a lot with leaders of different Hromada. I'm speaking about female leaders of local self-governments of different territories. I'm also organizing different focus groups upon request of different international organizations. I know the context, I know what's happening on site, especially with reference to splits. I'm also a psychological resilience trainer for communities. Reflecting on what makes a Hromada a community, what are the pillars of community resilience, I would like here to set aside these two terms because we can speak about Hromadas as a territorial unit and about communities. In 2014, due to voluntary expression, we had amalgamated territorial communities established. These are the people sharing the same territory under certain regulations, regulatory framework. They can coexist, they can live together, they have an understanding that they reside in this territory, they have an understanding of the development of this territory. Not all of them have a good understanding of the history of this territory, but still, in amalgamated territorial community, it is my experience that I am sharing. Hromada is something separate, and authorities is also something which stands aside. And authorities have their own vision about taxes to be collected, plans of economic, social, cultural development. Hromadas were accepting it. There were also some other cases when Hromadas active members participated in the discussions with authorities. As far as communities are concerned, in my opinion, these are not just people who share the same territory and those who share similar interests. These are the people who have a feeling of community, and this feeling of community is the very illustrative marker for me, which shows us that we have a group of people united by passion to something. It could be professional interest to something. It could be a problem they focus on. Through concerted effort and discussions, goals of their development, people are ready to discuss the challenges that they are facing, the conflicts, and they are ready to discuss how these problems and conflicts could be resolved, and also to fulfill their aims. Another observation of mine, another thing worth mentioning here, how do we differentiate between Hromadas and communities? In communities, you can also find it on the website of other education, and they had references to scientific resources. They have the agents of change. These are very bright, charismatic people. They played such a significant role in the history. These are the people who are not indifferent, who know how to adapt easily. They are very proactive. They speak a lot about communities. They share information and resources from one community to another community. And the very fact that we have these agents of change is indicative of a community. Before 2022, the way I understood Hromadas, before this year, Hromadas existed as administrative territorial units where we had some separate communities as bubbles, as separate groups. So they coexisted. There was a certain exchange if needed. However, critically speaking, we didn't have a sufficient number of communities inside Hromadas. After 2022, according to my observations, communities started playing a fundamental role in the lives of Hromadas. I think that due to these communities, we are actually holding on, and I hope that we will prevail. Another important component of communities mentioned by Dmytro, this is not only about the structure, it is the identity and shared emotional experience. Identity is about your convictions, about your beliefs, and what is even more important is traditions and rituals characteristic for this community. I had experience in the past year and this year when we worked in the Kharkiv region with the deoccupied Hromada. We had to discuss the process of inclusive recovery. We invited representatives of local authorities. Well, these are military administrations and they are known now. Well, these are people who are still there representing the region to have some considerations about identity, about traditions, about some beliefs in the community. When they launched this discussion, they realized that they need more voices, that they are representative for this community, they are the leaders of this community. They come to terms with the fact that the picture is not complete, and then they realize that we also have church, we also have education, we also have the youth. Of course, we do not have many young people. Now, when you have a willingness to listen to somebody else and to understand this picture in its fullness, then we understand that we can have a very active tool presented by community. When I was pondering over community resilience, because we know the psychological definition that resilience is your ability to overcome a crisis, preserving your integrity. These are some beliefs or persuasions that have you to be active, and also it is about your ability to acknowledge that this crisis is real. I realize how important resilience is when we discuss such topics as memorialization, grieving, as well as collaborationalism. I participated in one of the surveys for Zmina NGO. This is a human rights defense organization. And I understood that this topic of collaborationism is such an ordeal if you want to test the integrity of our communities. I cannot think about communities which could help us to deal with this problem that we encounter of collaborators. Due to the format that we use to analyze this phenomenon in Hromadas, it was not a dialogue. It was, as Max Luhashvili said, more of a research in action. We gathered people for discussion. These were people who suffered from occupiers. They were also in captivity, those who were under occupation, those who left. They shared their vision, they shared their ideas, and they also spoke about prosecution of collaborators. And believe me that this is such a terrifying thing to hear about, because the intensity of hatred is immense. So people, they really want blood to be shed. Frankly speaking, I don't know how we are going to deal with that. The only solution I see is to organize dialogues. for people to be able to at least express it, to invite people to share their opinions, to invite representatives of different communities that we have in Hromada's stakeholders, authorities, representatives, defense forces, and to have a joint discussion of what could be done about that. Avoiding stigmatization, trying to understand what made people do what they did. This is such a painful topic. And we know that it is the same with memorialization. I participated as a mentor for the program of facilitators to create hubs for veterans, and memorialization was also one of the topics. I was in one group. There were mothers of soldiers who died in action, and instead of discussing the veteran hub, they launched that discussion about us commemorating the deceased. And those circles mentioned by Kola, transformation techniques would be of great use for discussion of such topics, when on the one hand people can really share their emotions and cry and express their needs, and also to listen to all those people who sympathize with them, who know that it's important to commemorate the fallen. The most important thing about these circles is that there is nothing said about us without us. This is one of the principles. Another one is that we can offer our vision how to resolve this problem, or what is a take on a certain situation. At the intersection of different visions, we can find not necessarily truth, but something that can meet the need of so many of us. I think that these are the key points, and the most important takeaway message here is that Hromadas are encountering serious challenges. Communities are the actors which help to find a solution to such challenges. Yes, we can speak of different levels, a level of a Hromada and a level of a community. We have some time before a lunch break. We have Olena online. You can also drop your questions in a chat box, or we can also have some questions from the audience. Do we have somebody who can help us with the mic? I have a short question to our speaker, to our online presenter, because you have touched upon the topic of grieving in communities. Are there any recommendations, any practical pieces of advice, maybe some cases that you know about how to ease the process of grieving?
Well, I don't think I have a specific recipe here, but I will have some trainings now and integrational events, and I have this topic 10 focuses of attention in working with trauma. This is for people who have no psychological education, but these are the first line specialists, like pharmacists, for example, people working with documents, teachers. They are called the first line specialists, so that they can recognize what is the focus of a person right now. If this is a small community, people may know that this woman lost her husband 6 months ago. But if this is a community of more than 30,000 people, then it's not possible to know everyone. But, more soldiers are killed in bigger communities at the same time. So I'm trying to explain to people how to distinguish between traumatic event, and trauma. So I distinguish between these things, and people have to preserve themselves, because service providers have very high levels of burnout. And when you go to any community and you have now a village head, and they say, Olena, do anything but let them stay at work, because it's very difficult to keep the workers. Last here we had a survey. There were 5 communities. One of the colleagues asked, let's have a look what is the education of those people who are on these positions. These were the occupied communities of Kyiv Oblast and also partially Dnipro Oblast. So we had 10 communities surveyed, and 80% of people on these positions, these are people who have been there for 2 to 3 years. So they came here before the war, very shortly, or in times of war, and the competences they acquired were acquired at work there, and only 60% of them had a bachelor's education. So these are people who came here, and then there are people who may be in the process of grieving. So this is this acute pain we may be talking about. This may be anger, for example. It may be anything. And I can't give you a recipe, but this is about 10 focuses of attention and explanation of those to people, for them to pay attention to that, so that they preserve themselves and so that they respond to this person. Because when they understand where this person is in their traumatic grieving, it's already a part of the way. So maybe I have managed to answer your question, because I don't see any specific things I can tell you here right now, because I'm now looking at it through positive experiences of certain communities, and I'm trying to share it and unite people. And I say, I've seen this in this community, call them and ask them or something. But just to give you a universal recipe, I can't do that. Maybe you could draw just 1 or 2 examples of these communities, how they managed to do that. The communities you do trainings in. Well, I'm trying to say that those people, let's speak about psychosocial support. This is our main work. I work with people who provide psychosocial support. But before a person in grief comes to this expert, you have to go to the executive committee and get a kind of a certificate. So they open the office, and the person who is in the office is the first to contact with this person's aggression or challenging behavior, or the explosion of this pain which they have inside. And people have 5-6 persons like that every day. If it is your job to issue these death certificates, for example, it's a difficult job, and these people suffer from great burnout. But it's difficult to replace the person. According to the law on decentralization, many positions have been combined, and a person may be issuing death certificates here and birth certificates there, and that's not an easy job. And then drawing more examples, some communities, for example, when they decided to introduce a veteran assistant position, so that it was a pilot project in some regions. I don't know how the things are with this right now, but imagine there's a community budget, a community which is close to the front line. The land tax is not collected. So, this is this budget is spent on some additional payments to bonuses to teachers and other representatives, and now you get the order to hire a person who will get 16 to 21,000 hryvnias of salary. And since there are no bonuses here, these ladies who have keys from the registers, they have the salary of 5,000 hryvnias. Well, if they get some bonus, they may get up to 7,000 hryvnias. And then they have this other person coming here. So there will be some internal conflict between the executive power, the governmental bodies, and members of the council, because they all have to build some relations with each other here. And I looked at this position of veteran assistant. So he takes a veteran by the hand, brings him to this lady who has the key from the register, and she is the only one who can help them with something. And therefore, many communities decided to take a different path. They used this money to open some departments at social institutions, at centers for administrative service provisions. They have centers of resilience. They teach how to communicate with these people. And I think that this is a great thing for the community, because they will have well-trained people and the communities will benefit from that. But if we go back to grieving, the truth is that this matter is being researched right now, because we've never had it before. The practices I can see in international humanitarian organizations and that I hear from international speakers are rather well aimed at those people who come back after the war into the communities, but they don't speak about IDPs much because they don't have this experience in their wars. And in their experience, where they would have this trilogy: local residents, IDPs, and people who will be coming back from the front lines or are coming back right now. And cultural aspects, and I would even say transcultural aspects, may also be very different. People who come from more Russian-speaking regions, like such regions as Chernivtsi Oblast, they have Hrtsayev community, where they have a lot of Romanian culture, because they have a musical school where they teach Ukrainian, and a musical school where they teach Romanian, and then there are IDPs who speak Russian. So this is also a challenge for the community. So I don't think there's a universal recipe, but we take into account the practice, our experience, and also our Ukrainian ability to adapt quickly. I can, actually draw a comparison with what happened in the MHPSS in a couple of years ago. We usually worked with elderly people. And now the age group is from 18 to 49, and this is the main group which asks for psychosocial services, because people understand that they cannot withstand this acute stress. So I think that these cultural things related to grieving, which I can research, they are definitely changing. I hope I have answered the question, but it will be easier for me to answer if you have some more questions there. The organizers gave us 15 more minutes for questions and answers. So if you would like to ask something or share your experience of how you organized that, you're welcome. Glory to Jesus Christ. I'm from Lviv Seminary, and I have a question to Olena as well. Thank you for this question about grieving, but I also have a question about that memory that you mentioned, these new methods of memorialization, not just as we are used to, like these having these memorial plaques and things like that. So maybe from some smaller communities, villages, townships, because I'm from a village myself, and we have many combatants killed in action, and we're interested in how to do it in a better way for the villages. Thank you for this question. This is a very important question for me. Because there are many projects right now, and some funds are starting to work. For instance, like the Renaissance Foundation and the others, they started working with communities to help with the vision of memorialization. Speaking of memorialization, we don't know the basics here, because we believe in what we were told. Like going back to the Soviet times, it was accepted that a monument to an unknown soldier is definitely connected with Moscow and so on. But no, going back to the history in 1916, one of the persons who created memorials in Paris and London, that was 1920, that was the memorial dedicated to unknown soldiers. This person just saw a cross in England when they saw that an unknown soldier was buried there, and this person thought that this is a great idea because so many unknown soldiers are buried around the globe. And these monuments, memorial compositions to unknown soldiers. This is 1920, and while in Paris, this is the Triumph, and this is connected with Napoleon, who built it. So he was, when he died, he was brought under this arch, and beneath it there is this plaque to unknown soldiers. And Europe preserves the memory of people who died during the First and the Second World War. And I don't remember for being invited somewhere to a rally or to a meeting more than meetings and rallies this Second World War. But we're not speaking about the Cossack times, for example. We are only starting to speak about the things that were forbidden. And I would add realization to this grieving, because those variants which existed previously, they don't give a certain realization here. And we have to have this... I know that in Ivano-Frankivsk they have this memorial dedicated to the Revolution of Dignity, and I know that this is the marble. There is marble and there are silhouettes of people, and when I approach it, I see myself, and my internal question is, would I be able to do that? I may not have been able, but I should think what was the strength of that person to do that. So it has to be something conceptually new. So it's good to think about the example of other countries. For example, I cannot recall this person working with memorialization. This is a person from Vietnam, and that person made 3,000 figurines from ice, and they do it every year because that's a memorial dedicated to the combatants. But civilians were not mentioned after the war, but they also died during this war. So she made 3,000 figures from ice and put them in the center of the city on some steps. And when they melted, it was like tears. And that was a very important part of showing that they disappeared, basically, but we remember about them. I think that the system of grieving, this is also transcultural experience. I don't think there are cultures which have not felt pain. It may have been a different kind of pain or something different, but when I read about bombardments of London in the Second World War, I read the diaries of people there, and it seems like they used my words when I was under shelling and bombardment. So people did have this experience. We can look at those experience and study it. Unfortunately, there are no subjects like that at school, and this is only when people want to learn about it, about architecture, about memorialization, then they can find answers like that. I would look at what the others have and do something of ours based on the cultural heritage of the community, because each community has its heritage. For example, if we speak about Hasayev community, Vitnyansk community, which unites 7 villages, and there was a training on cohesion, and they were studying their cultural heritage, and there was one presenter who presented something during this training, and he said, we are sewing wreaths. And I said, well, what? And they said, this is a tradition of ours, and this is a great cultural tradition, and it is connected with preservation of families. And they said that these are the flowers, the periwinkle flowers, which are soon in this, and they have to invite the representatives of the most happy family in the village, and they have to, and that is presented to the newlyweds so that they are as happy as that family. So it's only a part of the culture. We can see only a part of that, but we need to integrate the cultural memory of that place, and we need to have this moment of realization of why we are doing this and who our audience is. If we want just to have a plaque and put it up on a school wall, then there will be no understanding there. I remember 1974 when 3 boys died in Afghanistan and they were from my city. And I don't remember that I had much realization there. I felt the pain because they were young and they died, but it did not touch me on the level of identity. And the task of the memorial is actually to touch upon this element of identity. Thank you. Well, our task is to make this memory alive, and I would like to ask Saras to share some new and maybe creative practices of memorialization of those who were killed. Well, speaking about the memorial plaques, the experience I've seen in Scotland is that they have them in the schools, and they indicate who of their school, of their pupils fought during the First and Second World Wars, because they had many soldiers who went to fight. So if you go to some historical churches which are more than 100 years old, so you will definitely see some mentions of the First and the Second World War there, and also those who fought there. So the churches will do it without any hatred and its cultivation, but they remind people that we participated there, we were heroes and we were victims. We remember about that. And another interesting and topical experience here is the American experience. It's not related to war, but it's about, well, the death of children or relatives. They have this very good practice of creating spaces. For example, if this was a child who died of cancer or some other disease, or there was a car crash, for example, they built playgrounds dedicated to these children. Or if this is a village, then they may plant a garden with apple trees there, or some sports grounds, something this person liked or loved, and they dedicate this space to this person. And sometimes it's not enough to have this plaque only, because you just start ignoring them at some point. But when you have this playground, for example, where parents bring children, if we speak about, well, deaths of children, and you recall them, you remember about them. So this is about this connection with what was important for the person who died, and what can be useful for the community, not only in terms of reminding. If this was sports, it's maybe a sports ground. If they liked books, that may be some maybe a library. And I like it how funerals are taking place right now, in the sense that we individualize this. I recall the latest funerals of my friends, and in one of those we wore red because my good friend Ivan, he liked the red color, and the others brought Zhivchik to his funeral because he liked Zhivchik and he was against alcohol. And these are these things where we combine this world of the dead and the world of the living. So we recall what this person liked. And we had a stand-up concert at the funeral of one of my friends. As shocking as it may be, we were recalling various humorous stories about Ivan, because there were many funny stories, and this is an individualized story, and it's also useful. This is about this lack of hatred, because I liked this phrase that you can serve God or you can be fighting the devil, and sometimes it seems that these are similar things, but fighting the devil may turn you into one, but if you serve God, you become like God. So this is about creating some spaces which tell us something about this person. Like, this person liked apple trees. This is something that is preserved, and which reminds us of this person, and which can be done in small communities and in big communities as well.
Yes, probably I could add another aspect how our organization is helping scholar leaders, foundation. When we work with territorial Hromadas or church communities, theological seminaries, missions, one of the questions in the context of the all-out war and since 2014, the hybrid war, we had the question of the sense shaping. What is my identity and what is my practice? We have Vital Sustainability Initiative project when we try to help people their strategies to organize workshops. Also, we provide help to Evangelical Church, some other seminaries, the Institute, the Healing Center, to look ahead. Very often, the war becomes a certain curtain, and you do not want to see what's behind the curtain with regard to the future. That is why, at the level of resilience, many NGOs, our organization, it is so important for us to try to open this curtain and to see what is waiting for us, also to think long term. Viktor Frankl spoke about logotherapy, the search for senses. It was not a statistical study, but of course that he had some people who underwent the same experience in the concentration camp, and he spoke about those people who are likely to survive as compared to other people because they actually had some senses, they had some plans for the future, they knew what they would be doing when they are finally free. That is why it could be about some practical help, but it is also about some mindset related activities to see behind the curtain, to think who we are and what we can do. You know, there is so much life in death and the very agitation that we have in the audience. The questions which are being posed here are an indicator that we really want to think a lot about those who are still here. What is important for me when we discuss the topic of commemoration is engaging those people who suffered the loss. The key conflict consists in the fact that local authorities took their decisions independently about commemoration, about memorials, about burial rites, about memorials also, which will commemorate the fallen. However, listening to those families affected by the loss is so important. This is conflict prevention, because we could have these conflicts when these people are already buried and we have these memorials erected. Moreover, it is the recognition of the families. It is the recognition of those who died in the war through the practice of participation. I was impressed by a Netflix series, The Future. I recommend it to you. There is a series on death. There is an interesting series, an interesting episode actually, about the future of burials, that it will be very individual, and maybe in the future we will have some means for the body to dissolve and to use it as compost. And I think that it will be really nice because you can plant trees and you can decorate these trees, and actually not to be sad all the time, but to be happy that you had this person present in your life. As we are pressed for time already, it's time for us to finalize. We started with topics of Hromadas and communities. Now we transition to discussing memorialization, commemoration, and burials. There are no ready-made rules. There are so many things which can be discussed, which have to be discussed. This is a very important indicator of the fact that this is a community, that you can reach a consensus, even if these are some very harrowing and challenging topics. I would like to invite all of you to act as the active prayer, which will take place in 5-10 minutes. The second floor, I would like to express gratitude for participation in this panel discussion. We will stay in touch. Thank you, our speakers. Thank you, Olena, for joining us.